to recognize what is going on and facilitate the processes that our students have. So our role has changed a lot, and technologies have played a big role in this. And this is also something that this distance learning period really allows us to do in a new way. But we should provide always our learners some way to communicate with us, be it phone calls once a week, be it conversations with groups or individually, be it just sharing your phone number and saying you can send me a message. Doesn't matter, but we need to have that tool. And then what we need to always make sure, even when teaching at distance, is that our learners need to have a way to get advice and feedback from us. So they should have a way of knowing where they are, how they are doing, if everything is going okay or not. And now this is hard when we work in a very traditional way, like me in the 80s, sending my assignments by snail mail to a remote teacher in Finland, and the post taking 5 weeks. So any feedback was slow, but at least then I had my mother who was monitoring the learning, give some feedback on how you're doing. Usually it was faster, do more, study harder. But anyways, you need to have some feedback and some advice. And then in distance learning, what we really need to look at in our assessment practices is looking at the learning process. The traditional assessment is always summative. It's at the end of a class, at the end of a course, you hold an exam and then you see if people pass or not. That is not very good in distance learning because our learners have to take on so much more responsibility in learning by themselves. And the self-directed learning is challenging. And the younger our students, or the more not used to online learning or distance learning, the more support they need. So we need to have a way to assess them along the way. And this kind of, for me, goes back to the feedback. If we have a communication channel so that we can look at how they progress, give feedback, support them with small messages in group conversations, if we see some large topics, this really feeds into the students' progress and ability to learn while distant. And I think, a very unfair thing to do in online learning and distance learning is just leave them be, send them assignments, have an exam at the end and say, oh, you failed. That's not very fair for the students. It's easiest for us though. So then we just ship in assignments, ship in the exam, and then go ha if they don't succeed. But then again, educators always have a responsibility to make sure that as many of our students as possible have the ability to pass our courses and classes with the highest possible marks. Because if everybody passes our classes with the highest possible marks, then we have really succeeded in our job. Okay, so I wanted to take in some considerations when you're planning your education. So we are in this situation where kids are a bit far, and we have these things that we need to plan. And technology, like what tools, what ICT tools I want to use, is just one small fraction of the picture that we need to consider. So what is the environment? We have to consider where our students are, where are they learning? Is it kitchen table, sofa, outside? Where is it? Okay, what type of tools do they have access to? How can I arrange my teaching? What do I have at my disposal? What can I do? And then based on those, okay, how am I going to teach? What are my methods? Am I going to organize daily meetings like classes online? Or do I send us my assignments? Do I do podcasts or some sort of audio file that they can listen to? Do I make videos somewhere that they can access? And so forth. And how do I assess? So this is something to consider. And something I always want to point out when we're talking about learning in the 21st century, that we really need to consider our learners. And it wasn't a big thing before, and this is often still a bit neglected. But we always need to tune whatever we do to our learners. So who are they? What age? And what is their learning style? And that, as you know, differs from person to person. what is their level of self-respect, because that affects, how we might present things to them. What are their interests, needs, abilities? What motivates them? Their personalities, history, culture, big thing. So all of things to have them also in the back of our heads, because something that works for a group of students in one place doesn't necessarily transfer over to students in another place. You can't copy paste. Education is, in that sense, always highly tailored. And and I think very good teachers, and we see these teachers all around the world, they kind of have this inherent ability to fine tune whatever they present to their students in a way that really sparks the highest level of learning in them. Now, this picture brings us a bit closer to online learning, and something that we really need to understand about learning nowadays is that we talk more about facilitating learning processes. So we are facilitators of learning. And one major component of facilitating learning is understanding information flows. And this is where technology actually plays a huge role. And this is also behind the collectivistic learning strategies that are examined and implemented also nowadays. But in a traditional classroom, the information went from the teacher to the students, and that was it. The teacher, like even in my childhood, was a primary source of information. So if you wanted to know something, the teacher knew best. The teacher knew more than you did. The teacher knew usually more than the class did. Even after you passed your class, the teacher still knew more than you did. But that has changed. So nowadays, we communicate with our teachers. So there's that direction existing. But at the same time, the students, they communicate with each other. So especially during distance learning, what you will find is your students, and especially older students, but what I saw with my kids was that even smaller kids, they talk to themselves, and that happens a lot nowadays. So kids will talk. Hey, how did you do this? How do you manage that? Do you have an answer for this? And the teacher is usually unaware of these conversations, but we have to understand that they happen, and there's a lot of information shared between students. But something that flows back to us as teachers is that our students come to us saying, hey, I saw this thing on the internet. I found this article. How does this relate to what we are doing? And how about this book? And then my mom said, or my dad said, or, or then, I saw this YouTube video. And we have to be willing to accept that our students are coming to us saying, asking us more questions, questioning something that we said, because they have access to so much more information that we ever did. So through that, our role changes. It's not our job anymore to give them all the answers and all the right answers, but really to help them navigate this world of information. Because students, sometimes they don't know what is real and what is, as Mr. Trump said, it's fake news. It's a word we didn't have a few years ago, and now it's they didn't know how to make how to differentiate. And we need to give them the tools saying, okay, you know what, that thing you saw, it's not valid information because ABC. And if you want to look at something that valuable content, this is the search criteria and so forth. But this is something that happens a lot, and especially now during distance education and during COVID-19. And I think that honestly, even after COVID-19, a lot of these practices that we have to develop very fast nowadays, they will stay. So this is a huge thing, this flow of information and how it changed, that will stick and should affect how we as educators do our job. And lastly, because I didn't want to just give you these fine ideas, a small four level tool that I have used with many of my colleagues when planning online learning or digital learning or integration of IT tools in education. And it is called the SUMMER model. And basically what this model invites us to do is to understand that technology can have many different roles in education. And something that we very quickly start to do is try to find ways to do what we have always done in the classroom in a digital environment. And more often than not, these solutions tend to fail a bit because the value added of doing digitally something that you do in person is very low. So you know that when you have your classroom present with you in class and you're teaching them, there's a lot of nonverbal communication, a lot of interaction happening. If you then try to do the same thing online, it doesn't really work that well. It can be troublesome. But this model invites us to look at, okay, well, we can do that, but how can we use technology to augment what we do it a bit better? So where does it function better? And I think, there are lots of tools for that. Then we have the modification level, and there we also go towards higher order thinking skills. If we apply this to Bloom's taxonomy, which looks at the different levels of learning, so we move towards higher level thinking. So okay, how can we really redesign what we do with technology? And the highest level is redefinition. So what can we do nowadays that wasn't possible before, thanks to technology? And this is something I want to invite you to really think about. Like, what am I doing? Am I just looking at how to do what I used to do with technology? Or am I really trying to look at, what am I able to do nowadays that I wasn't able to do before? And really spark those higher level thinking skills in my students and really help them become awesome learners. Now, this is not a value scale. So there's nothing wrong in substitution. There's nothing wrong in augmentation, nothing wrong in modification, and nothing wrong with redefinition. They are all important. But we should challenge ourselves to always look at, okay, the things I do, how do I place them in this scale? And what I did was a short application of this to the idea of writing, because that is something human beings have been doing a long time. So if you look at how we could substitute writing with computers, so that's easy. You can write on your computer instead of writing on paper. You have Google Docs, you have Office tools, you have TextPad. So that is great. You can write on your computer. Fantastic substitution, by the way. I like it. Now, if you look at augmenting writing, so what could that be? So nowadays, when we write something on Word, on Excel, first of all, it has spell check, which is immensely important, and you can modify your text. That already is augmenting it. So as you go, you can quickly modify it without having to retype or it was painful back in the day. Or try to scrub what you did and redo everything. But also you can add images and you can even add videos to your writing. You can embed your YouTube video right in the middle of your essay. So that's augmenting. So that is, you're still doing your writing assignments, but there are these improvements. Modification of writing could be that, instead of me writing my essay, instead of me writing my assignments, how about we work collaboratively on a shared document, like you can do in Google Docs and many of these other tools? So now already the technology allows us to modify these things. So instead of me writing something all alone or you writing your notes all alone, we can have shared notes that we work on together. So I get the benefit of your thoughts, you get the benefits of mine, and we make sense of the world, we analyze things together, but we're still waiting. So that again, pretty neat. And then the redefinition. Okay, so how could technology redefine our idea of writing? So how about, we could take away writing, and because we usually use writing for students to process information, so we use essays a lot. So why do we have them write everything? Is writing such an important tool in the working life nowadays? Or could we have them share their thoughts through audios, videos? I have written videos. Sorry, videos, audios, pictures. Or could we have them create a book? That's something also that happens. That instead of us providing students with a book, how about during a course they do their own study book online and show in their videos and pictures as part of that book. And at the end of the class, instead of the beginning, but at the end, you have an ebook written by the students, verified by the teacher, with all the contents, enriched with videos and audios and pictures and so forth. And that's something we can do nowadays. If all of us have the skills and capacities, but still, it can be done. So from writing our notes in our notebooks with paper and pen, we can go pretty far nowadays if we want to. And now the question is like, what works for you? What works for your students? What works for the topic that you're trying to teach and your learning objectives and so forth. So this was my 15 minutes. I didn't actually check the time. Hope it wasn't too much over, too much under. But at the end, I wanted to share with you a Big Finish proverb that we said, and I think at the end, if you remember one thing about what I said, it should be that if what we learn without joy, we forget without grief, and that really means that whatever we do as education providers, what we give to our students should be something that inspires them and engages them and really builds up their motivation and is not painful to do, because we are all used to school being about grit and hard work and pushing and passing your exams. But even studies show that if you're enjoying what you're doing, your performance level is higher. And if we think about Finnish education and how we do in the PISA exams, we manage very high PISA results with extremely, extremely short school days because we focus on the engagement, actually the relevance as well, but really like recognizing individuals, facilitating their learning processes, making education. Fun is not, it's not a comedy club, it's a serious thing, but still it should be something that inspires and engages the youth. And I think we have a country full of kids to show that through engaging, enjoyable, motivating, relevant learning, that's how you get the best results. And all of this stress, distance, contact, what tools, what you do, they should all be to serve that higher purpose. So that is it. I thank you. I'm not sure if we have time for questions in right now or at the end, but also feel free to write to me, drop any messages. I'm always available.